Hello everyone, this is Stephen Balch, your instructor for Introduction to Macroeconomics at Ozarka College. This morning what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of feedback on the chapters 13 and 14 activities that I finished grading earlier this week. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the next set of activities for chapters 15 and 16. All right, so like I said, I did finish grading the chapters 13 and 14 activities earlier this week. Hopefully you've already gone in and looked at your grades for those activities and read the grading comments. If you haven't done that yet, go ahead and do that as soon as you can. And let me know if you have any questions at all. Overall, most of you did well on the assignment. But there were a couple of you that didn't fully answer some of the questions. And so I had to count some points off for that. So if you have questions about that after you read the grading comments, just let me know, like I said, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have. But like I said, overall, most of you did well. So keep up the good work on the assignments. On the discussion that we had for chapters 13 and 14 that dealt with the production of the penny and the nickel, I thought that went very well. And I really appreciate everyone's participation on the discussion. So keep up the good work on the discussions as well. And let's see, on the test, the chapter test for 13 and 14, most of you did well on that, but just remember that you can take those tests as many times as you want to up until the due date. And your highest grade is automatically recorded, so just kind of keep that in mind. All right, so that brings us to what we've got coming up due for our next set of activities. So if we go to the activities page in my Ozarka, right now we are on week 12 of the semester, kind of towards the latter part of week 12. And of course, we don't have anything due this week because we just had work due late last week. And our next set of activities is due the first day of next week. So it just kind of fell that way where we didn't have anything due this week. But just like I always tell you, even though the next set of activities isn't due until Sunday, this coming Sunday, April 13th, you should still be working on those activities that are due Sunday. Don't wait until Sunday to get started because you'll probably have other things going on. You know, the weather's supposed to be nice, and I'm sure you'll want to do other things this weekend. So my suggestion is to go ahead and be working on it this week, and that way if you want your weekend free, you can have it free, okay? So just kind of keep that in mind. So, yeah, chapters 15 and 16, the assignment, test, and discussion are all due by Sunday, April 13th, which is this coming Sunday. So you've still got a few days to work on it, but like I said, don't wait until the last day because you may have other things come up. All right, and just very briefly, I'm going to kind of talk about what's covered in these chapters. So starting with chapter 15, that covers monetary policy. We've talked about basically two types of policies that the government uses to manage the economy and kind of meet those three goals that we've talked about many times this semester. And one of those, in addition to fiscal policy, which we've already talked about, is the monetary policy, which is regulation of the money supply. In chapter 15, you're going to learn about demand for and supply of money and how the demand and supply of money together create the price or the interest rates for money. So you'll talk about that. So it'll discuss that in chapter 15. So how interest rates affect demand for money, how the supply of money affects interest rates, how the Federal Reserve manipulates the money supply to affect interest rates. And those are things that you hear about a lot on the news about how the Fed, makes a decision whether to either increase the money supply or decrease the money supply in order to influence interest rates. And so these are a lot of things that you like I said, hear about on the news a lot, and you maybe wonder what that means or how that affects me as an individual in the economy. And so chapter 15 is going to answer a lot of those questions for you. You're going to learn a lot about how monetary policy works. Okay. In addition to what I've already mentioned, also towards the end of the chapter, you're going to learn about economic fluctuations and how monetary policy can be used to manage those economic fluctuations, both upturns and downturns in the economy. Also, you'll learn about foreign exchange and the quantity theory of money. And then finally, at the very end of the chapter, you will learn about the various strategies that are used for monetary policy. There are different strategies that the Fed uses, and so you'll learn about those. All right, so that's chapter 15. And then chapter 16 deals with the active and passive approaches to managing the economy. There are certain passive things that happen in the economy that automatically are set to manage upturns and downturns in the economy. And then there are other things where the government has to step in and actually do something actively to manage the economy. So you're going to learn about both the active and passive approaches to managing the economy. And usually, for most economies, you're going to use a combination of both. All right? So you'll learn about those. Also, you're going to learn in chapter 16 about the types of lags that can occur when implementing a particular economic policy. For example, when the Fed lowers interest rates in order to try to spur economic activity, it takes some time for that to actually happen. And so you're going to learn about some of the types of lags that happen. In other words, the time between when the policy is implemented and the time that it actually has the effect that we want. Okay? Also in chapter 16, you will learn about how expectations affect economic policy. There are a lot of things right now with tariffs and inflation, interest rates, and not just the actual real changes in those variables. It's not just those real changes that affect economic activity, but also people's expectations. One of the common things that economists look at is consumer expectations. That's an actual index that comes out every month, where it kind of gauges consumers' either optimism or pessimism currently in the economy. How they feel about what's going to happen in the future. Are they going to have a job? Are they going to get the raises that they're expecting? Are they going to have to pay more for the necessities that they need? These are all things that affect how the economy is managed by the Fed. Is those expectations as well. Also, towards the end of chapter 16, you'll learn about the Phillips curve. And then finally, at the very end of the chapter, you're going to learn about something called the natural rate hypothesis. All right? So that's chapters 15 and 16. So be working on those. Hopefully, you've already gotten started on these activities since you've had this whole week to be working on that. But like I said, as you're working on it, just let me know if you have questions. Remember all the resources you have. You have your textbook. You have the PowerPoint slides that I've linked on the assignment page. You've got your videos that I've linked on the assignment page. So you've got plenty of resources there. Just make sure you're making use of those resources. And I think most of you are. But I always like to remind everybody of the resources that are there. All right. And so that's really all I have for today. So enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend. And I will talk to you again sometime probably next week. Thank you.